I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one night, staring blankly at my dwindling bank account on my laptop screen. It wasn't the first time those numbers felt like a heavy weight pressing down on me, but this time, something inside stirred differently. Around me, friends and acquaintances, some who started with less, some who even had bigger obstacles, seemed to be finding their way, building financial momentum while I remained stuck in place. I had no inheritance waiting, no connections to open doors, no lucky break that dropped into my lap. Just a relentless grind and a gnawing question. Why them, and why not me? That question haunted me more than I liked to admit. It whispered doubts in my ear when I tried to plan, mocked my efforts when I hesitated, and grew louder as comparisons piled up. Watching others thrive, I began to feel the sting of unfairness, not just about money but about life itself. How could people who looked like me, with no apparent advantages, suddenly be advancing while I was still trying to get past the start line? It didn't make sense. It felt like life had handed them a script I never got a chance to read. But somewhere along the way, as the frustration settled into reflection, I started noticing something curious. Prosperity wasn't about the luck or privilege everyone assumed. No, it was quieter, hidden in the everyday choices people made, the way they viewed setbacks, how they responded to risk, and how they treated money itself. I saw that some approached challenges like a wall to stop them, while others treated those same walls like puzzles to decode. I watched those who stumbled get back up differently, not frozen by failure, but pivoting, adapting, learning. I realized then that beneath the surface of who had it and who didn't was a deeper, invisible fabric woven through mindset and emotional habit, a pattern that shaped every step towards or away from financial progress. These weren't grand talents or secret formulas. They were subtle rhythms of thought, feeling, and behavior practiced daily, often unconsciously. And here I was, trapped in a different pattern altogether, unknowingly replaying scripts that held me back. This dawning awareness didn't bring instant relief. It raised new questions, stirred up old fears, and forced me to look inward in ways I hadn't before. What stories was I telling myself about money? How did I react when unexpected expenses cropped up? What about when opportunity showed up disguised as risk or uncertainty? The answers weren't always comfortable, but they were real, and they pointed to a truth I couldn't ignore. Financial struggle wasn't just about circumstances. It was about how I was wired, mentally and emotionally, to relate to money, risk, and possibility. If I was going to change my story, it wouldn't be enough to work harder or wish for a different chance. I had to start rewiring the internal compass guiding every decision I made, gradually shifting away from survival mode and toward a place of strategic intention. That journey wasn't about flipping a switch overnight, but about understanding and gently transforming patterns ingrained over years. I want you to imagine yourself in my shoes, asking the same tough questions, feeling the same waves of frustration, and standing at the crossroads between repeating familiar patterns or choosing a different path. Maybe you've already felt that sharp pinch of injustice, watching others claim financial wins you long for. Maybe the inner questions sound familiar. Why does it work for them, but not for me? What do I need to change inside to move forward? This story, my story, is about unlocking those hidden mental patterns that quietly steer our financial lives. It's about realizing that the hero we often wait for isn't a person, but a mindset, and that mindset can be trained, learned, and refined. The path ahead won't rely on luck or secret connections, but on understanding how daily invisible decisions accumulate into lasting financial change. So, as we begin this exploration together, know this: the frustration, the feeling of being stuck, the sense of unfairness, they're signals, not roadblocks. They invite us to look beneath the surface and discover what truly shapes how we relate to money and opportunity. And that discovery holds the key to turning struggle into growth, fear into learning, and invisibility into control. Before we dive deeper, I want you to hold on to this. The hero of your financial story isn't someone else, it's you. And just like any hero's journey, it starts from where you are, with no guarantees except the chance to see things differently. What comes next is a journey into the mind and heart of prosperity, and it's one I'm honored to take with you. There was a day that stands out vividly in my memory, a moment when I witnessed a seemingly small event that unraveled a profound truth about how people navigate their finances. It was during a casual gathering with old acquaintances, some thriving financially, others barely holding on. One among them shared how a recent business setback had almost shattered their confidence. Yet within days, they were sketching fresh plans and exploring new markets. Their calm resilience puzzled me. Meanwhile, I found myself frozen by similar obstacles, caught in endless loops of worry and hesitation. It was then that I recognized how some individuals possess what felt like an invisible compass directing them through uncertainty rather than flinging them into despair. This compass, I discovered, operates not by erasing emotions like fear or doubt, but by transforming the way those feelings are engaged. Instead of perceiving challenges as insurmountable walls, it encourages viewing them as stepping stones. The sharp edge of risk softens, becoming manageable if approached with curiosity rather than avoidance. I reflected on my own patterns and realized that my initial reaction to surprise expenses or sudden opportunities was often to retreat into safety, seeking to regain control by minimizing movement altogether. Yet, this strategy created the very stagnation I feared. Imagine standing at a crossroads on a foggy night. Some people hesitate, waiting for the fog to lift before moving, while others carefully feel their way forward, repositioning with each step. The difference lies not in bravery or ignorance of danger, but in how risk is internally framed. I began to observe that those who thrive financially had developed a narrative where missteps weren't fatal errors, but lessons etched into their growth journey. Instead of catastrophizing failure, they engaged in active problem-solving, reframing setbacks as data points to adjust their future direction. This subtle, often unconscious shift in thinking transformed the entire experience of risk from a looming threat to an informative partner. A particular story epitomizes this evolution. An acquaintance I admired started out with almost nothing and endured years of financial hardship. When faced with a collapsing project, instead of spiraling into despair, they documented every miscalculation and spoke openly about these moments, not with shame, but with acceptance. These reflections became a personal treasure map, guiding wiser choices ahead. Watching that transformation reminded me how emotional habits, those repeated mental scripts we cling to, shape the quality of our decisions more than the external circumstances we face. As this insight unfolded, I understood how deeply emotions weave into our financial actions. It isn't just fear or excitement at play, but a complex interplay of identity, beliefs, and past experiences that color every decision. For example, I recalled times where I interpreted offers of help or advice as signals of incompetence rather than opportunity, a reaction tied tightly to old wounds of pride and distrust. This defensive posture narrowed my field of vision, blinding me to possibilities available just outside my comfort zone. Recognizing this pattern was unsettling, yet liberating, because it illuminated a very real mechanism keeping me trapped. I realized that my relationship with uncertainty was like living in a house with fragile glass walls. The slightest knock made me recoil, fearful of breaks that might never come. But others seemed to inhabit sturdier homes, where dents and cracks were expected and repaired without panic. This metaphor helped me see how past narratives about financial safety were more rigid than they needed to be. By loosening those constraints, the emotional burden lightened, creating room for flexibility and adaptive thinking. It encouraged me to experiment with choices that previously felt too risky, knowing that occasional stumbles were part of the learning curve, not path markers of failure. Now, consider how this applies when you face a chance that feels risky, maybe an investment opportunity, a job change, or even a simple financial commitment. Notice the immediate emotional response. Does your mind rush to anticipate disaster or to weigh possibilities? If it leans toward dread, what childhood messages or previous experiences might be silently unfolding? By tuning into these internal reactions, you begin to untangle the invisible threads that pull you toward caution or courage. This kind of self-inquiry doesn't demand quick fixes, but invites patience and curiosity. Another crucial layer is how self-perception influences financial behavior. When I felt inadequate or undeserving, I often unconsciously chose options that limited my growth. Low-paying gigs, fear of negotiation, reluctance to ask for help. By contrast, those who viewed themselves as resourceful, regardless of current circumstances, approached opportunities with a readiness to leverage even small advantages. This wasn't mere confidence or luck, but a cultivated internal script that reinforced resilience. Therefore, progressing financially requires more than analyzing numbers. It demands nurturing a coherent image of oneself as capable and worthy of abundance. One evening, after journaling these reflections, I caught myself smiling softly. I realized that the roadmap I had been searching for was not out there on some distant horizon, but embedded within my evolving understanding of how I engage with internal uncertainty, emotional habits, and self-concept. This ongoing work of awareness gradually equips us to navigate the labyrinth of financial life with increasing clarity and courage. It showed me that the journey toward prosperity is as much about mastering our inner landscape as managing external resources. That internal mastery, I now see, becomes the true north guiding every wise financial turn. I remember a moment that shifted my understanding profoundly, not because of an epiphany, but because of witnessing a subtle interaction that revealed layers I hadn't explored before. I was sitting across from a close friend, someone deeply familiar with hardship and persistence. In the midst of a conversation about setbacks, they described their approach not as managing risk, but as cultivating financial intuition. Intrigued, I pressed for clarity. They explained it like this: it's a muscle you exercise through repeated experience, a quiet sense of timing and opportunity that guides you away from needless fear into calculated action. This wasn't a concept I had encountered in books or seminars. It felt grounded, lived, and personal. Their words lingered long after the conversation ended. This idea of intuition as a cultivated skill opened a new doorway in my journey. It made me reflect on how deeply practice and emotional attunement influence our financial navigation. We typically prioritize hard data, budgets, forecasts, balance sheets, but overlook the subtle, ongoing internal dialogue that dictates whether we leap forward or retreat. What had previously felt like a random mix of luck and hardship now appeared as the interplay of tacit knowledge gained through trial, error, and emotional feedback. My friend's description suggested that emotional literacy, as much as fiscal literacy, orders how we handle uncertainty. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in tracking my own patterns of response to everyday financial moments. I noticed, for example, how often anxiety would flood in without any apparent external cause, just the act of opening an email about a bill or seeing a sales pitch. The emotional weight sometimes overshadowed the objective facts. This internal turbulence, if unaddressed, distorted my judgment like a fog clouding a window pane. Conversely, in moments when I paused to identify and label what I was feeling, that same fog would begin to lift, allowing clearer choice. The gap between reacting impulsively and responding intentionally seemed wider and more important than I had imagined. One afternoon, while sifting through old journals, I stumbled upon entries revealing recurring themes: hesitation rooted in a sense of not enough, never quite enough money, knowledge, or confidence to act. This chronic scarcity mindset felt like an invisible tether that pulled me back from seizing opportunities, however small. I recalled a conversation with a mentor who remarked, "Scarcity isn't just a lack of resources, it's a state of mind that demands to be rewired." The analogy of an elastic band tightened around my decision-making process stuck with me. Each time I confronted financial possibility, that invisible band constricted, limiting my reach. To challenge this constriction, I experimented with what might seem unconventional. I consciously practiced gratitude focused on existing resources and small wins, no matter how modest. Instead of zeroing in on deficits, I began holding in awareness moments when my efforts yielded progress or when I had helped others. Slowly, this shift rewired my baseline perspective. The elastic band loosened, and with less internal resistance, choices that had once felt perilous seemed approachable. I started treating financial decisions like a dance, sometimes holding close to safety, sometimes stepping forward with a tentative grace, rather than a battleground demanding all or nothing. At one point, I decided to test this new mindset in the real world. A local workshop offering a skill upgrade caught my attention, but the cost felt daunting. In the past, I would have dismissed it outright, labeling it an unaffordable luxury. This time, I paused and acknowledged my hesitation as a protective habit rather than an absolute truth. After discussing it openly with my partner, I found creative ways to adjust other expenses, framing the workshop as an investment in future opportunity instead of a risk. The moments of fear still surfaced, sharp and insistent, but instead of silencing them, I let them inform my caution without dictating it. I enrolled, and the experience deepened not only my professional skills, but also my capacity to engage money decisions with curiosity rather than paralysis. This process illuminated how emotional agility, our capacity to tolerate discomfort and adapt emotionally, acts like a compass in financial navigation. It's not a guarantee against pitfalls, but a skill that enables us to recalibrate quickly instead of becoming immobilized. I marveled at how this shifted my whole way of engaging with money. Instead of brute force or blind optimism, measured flexibility became the modus operandi. Recognizing emotions as valuable information rather than enemies, I cultivated a richer internal landscape to guide action. Reflecting back, I also grasped the importance of voice and narrative in this reorientation. The stories I told myself about money, whether it was scarcity, unworthiness, or fatalism, had boxed me in. With intention, I began to rewrite those narratives into ones emphasizing resourcefulness, learning, and creative problem-solving. This act of inner authorship required persistent effort and moments of frustration when old scripts resurfaced, but it slowly empowered me to choose which thoughts to nourish and which to release. Engaging with these deeper psychological processes felt like discovering a nuanced game beneath the surface of financial life. Mastery wasn't about complex calculations alone. It required attuning to the ebb and flow of internal experience, embracing uncertainty as fertile ground. With every step, I became less of a passive passenger trapped by circumstance and more of an active navigator charting a course through shifting seas. In this way, financial progress transformed from a goal in the distance to a living, breathing process unfolding within me. It was late one evening when I found myself sitting on a worn-out bench in a quiet park, the city's distant hum fading into a soft backdrop. I had just walked away from a conversation that left a gnawing sensation in my chest, not from frustration alone, but because I confronted a truth I had long avoided. My friend, someone I admired for their steady progress, spoke candidly about the way they redefined mistakes as indispensable detours. Without the wrong turns, they said, I wouldn't have the map I carry now. Their words echoed in my mind, prompting me to question how much of my hesitation to move forward came from an unwillingness to embrace uncertainty with open hands. I recalled an earlier time when I was paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong move. Every new venture seemed to hang under a spotlight of scrutiny, and the pressure to be certain immobilized me. I hesitated so much that opportunities slipped past, leaving me with a growing list of what-ifs. That night in the park, I confronted the fact that my strategy had been avoidance disguised as pragmatism. What if progress demanded stepping into discomfort, inviting mistakes as companions instead of enemies? The thought unsettled me, like stepping onto an unknown trail without a clear end in sight. Days later, during a chance meeting at a coffee shop, I shared these reflections with a mentor who smiled knowingly. They explained something subtle yet profound. Success often grows from practiced vulnerability, the willingness to expose oneself to risk repeatedly and extract lessons from each stumble. It was as if I had viewed setbacks through the lens of finality, while people advancing forward treated them as experiments. That comparison hit me deeply because it revealed a hidden chokehold, my resistance to being seen as imperfect. Over and over, I had equated financial risk with personal failure, a binary that left no room for nuance or experimentation. I remembered a struggling artist I knew in my neighborhood, someone no one pegged for financial success, yet who continually evolving her craft and business. She explained to me how she intentionally set failure goals, small challenges deliberately designed to push boundaries and invite mistakes. I fail forward, she told me, because with every failure, I strip away fear and get closer to what works. The courage in that practice wasn't born from grand confidence, but from an internal decision to treat error as a trusted guide. Witnessing her transformation had me reconsider how I could reframe setbacks from paralyzing verdicts to meaningful courses. When I applied this perspective to my own hesitations, a pattern emerged. I was hoarding control, clutching tightly to the illusion of safety. This tight grip meant I held myself back from trying new paths, from venturing toward possibilities masked as risk. Yet the truth was, the only guarantee in life was uncertainty. Accepting it as a landscape to traverse, not a threat to evade, became a pivotal shift in my mindset. The phrase, "failure is not final," morphed from a comforting cliché into a lived wisdom that challenged me to grow. Interestingly, I also noticed how my internal dialogue about risk had a distinct tone, a harsh critic layering doubt and second-guessing. It whispered cautions that often lacked grounding in real data, but sounded convincing nonetheless. Shifting this narrative required conscious effort, listening to that inner voice, questioning its claims, and choosing to replace doubts with curiosity-led questions. For example, instead of asking, "What if this ends badly?" I learned to ask, "What can I learn if this doesn't go as planned?" That subtle pivot carried me from avoidance into exploration, lighting up new avenues previously hidden by fear. One vivid example was a time when I found an opportunity to collaborate on a side project requiring investment I was wary to commit. Earlier versions of myself would have declined outright. This time, I gave myself permission to engage with the risk incrementally. I negotiated a smaller financial commitment, allowed space to monitor progress closely, and prepared mental notes on how to course correct. Engaging with the project in this scaffold manner turned out to be a powerful lesson in calculated courage. It wasn't about reckless leaps, but about building a relationship with uncertainty that was manageable and generative. This evolving mindset also started revealing social dimensions. I recognized how talking openly with others about setbacks and risks created a climate of shared learning and support. When I once believed isolation protected me, I found that vulnerability connected me to insights and encouragement beyond my reach. Conversations with diverse people, friends, colleagues, even strangers, offered fresh perspectives, underscoring that financial struggles and growth journeys are universal, not personal failings. This shared humanity dissolved shame and invited collaboration as a pathway to resilience. Reflecting on all this, I see how transforming my approach to uncertainty was less about eliminating discomfort and more about riding its waves with steadier balance. Like learning to surf, the first falls are daunting, but each return to the water builds skill and confidence. By renewing my relationship with risk and error, I rewired my habits from avoidance to engagement, opening space for authentic growth. It dawned on me that the invisible patterns shaping our choices hold power not for their permanence, but for our capacity to evolve them intentionally. The journey demanded humility, patience, and above all, a willingness to step forward, sometimes blindly, and trust in the unfolding path. I recall the moment I first noticed how tightly I clung to certainty, as if it were the last lifeline amid a stormy sea. It was during a casual conversation with a colleague whose demeanor exuded ease with financial unpredictability. She described embracing ambiguity as an adventurous journey, not a threat to be avoided. Her eyes sparkled as she recounted multiple instances where ambiguity nudged her into unexpected avenues, bringing fresh opportunities rather than devastation. That perspective challenged my ingrained need for control, exposing how much I had been resisting the very essence of growth. Her approach reminded me of an artist improvising during a live performance, not scripting every note in advance, but listening, responding, and creating in the moment. I realized I had been trying to conduct my financial life like an orchestral conductor demanding perfect execution, my joy lost in tight control. The spontaneity she embraced invited me to rethink my stance toward uncertainty. Perhaps there was wisdom in fluidity and trust, even amid chaos. Shortly after that exchange, I encountered a situation that tested this newfound openness. A sudden opportunity to partner on a creative venture arose, accompanied by unclear financial projections and unpredictable timelines. Initially, my instinct urged me to decline. Unpredictability set off alarm bells wired from past disappointments. Yet, recalling my colleague's courage, I chose to view this as an experiment rather than a gamble. Approaching the decision like a scientist testing a hypothesis, I laid out small-scale steps, defining my limits while allowing flexibility. I still remember the flutter in my stomach as I sent the initial proposal, half excitement, half apprehension. Those first weeks were a roller coaster. Successes mingled with mistakes, and I kept diligent notes on what I discovered, rather than labeling outcomes as wins or losses. More than the financial outcomes, this mindset shift fostered resilience. I learned to decouple my self-worth from fluctuating balances and instead anchor it in my capacity to adapt and learn. A surprising development was how this process illuminated previously unnoticed social patterns, shaping my thinking. I began paying closer attention to my circle and the narratives they held about financial risk and adaptability. Many among them echoed a quiet fear of instability, suppressing ambitions until conditions seemed safe enough. Others, however, shared stories of hard-won courage through trial and error, often galvanized by mentors who modeled openness to vulnerability. Witnessing this contrast underscored how our internal scripts often mirror or oppose who we surround ourselves with. I started inviting honest discussions about financial setbacks within my network. One evening spent exchanging stories of missteps and recoveries transformed the energy around failure from a taboo into a source of shared wisdom. The laughter that followed tales of epic blunders signaled a collective lightening of the heavy burden shame had painted over mistakes. This vibrant exchange reframed struggle as a bridge connecting us rather than a chasm separating the successful from the stalled. Now, consider how this plays out the next time you face a new, uncertain opening. If fear arises, what responses surface almost automatically? Can you invite curiosity to gently inquire, "What might I discover here?" instead of shutting down? I encourage you to picture financial choice like stepping stones across a river. Sometimes stones shift or wobble beneath your weight, and the best you can do is steady yourself and keep moving. Each step, whether steady or uneven, builds your capacity for balance. Reflecting on my evolving mindset, I noticed how cultivating patience became another crucial piece. I used to demand instant clarity and results, pushing myself into discomforting leaps or retreating abruptly when the path blurred. But patience invited me to hold space for uncertainty's natural ebb and flow. It was like tending a garden. Some seeds sprout instantly, others take seasons. Giving myself permission to nurture progress over time softened pressure and eased decision fatigue. Another dimension unfolded when I began journaling about my fears and hopes around money. Pouring unfiltered thoughts onto paper uncovered hidden narratives and allowed me to dialogue with my internal critic. Writing offered a refuge, a place where contradictory emotions could coexist without judgment. Often, I found that my harshest doubts held kernels of truth needing acknowledgement, while my hopeful visions sparked fresh motivation. This art of reflective writing became a secret ally in weaving together clarity amid fog. Finally, recognizing the physicality of financial stress became necessary. I started noticing the tension creeping into my shoulders or the tightness in my chest when confronting monetary dilemmas. Incorporating breath work and mindful pauses before decisions created small but powerful shifts. These practices helped me disentangle physical anxiety from mental clutter and foster a calmer presence. With each conscious breath, I reclaimed a bit more agency over how money shaped my inner world. Through these varied experiences, I uncovered a richer, multi-layered approach to financial uncertainty, one that values flexibility, community, patience, introspection, and self-care. It has been less about erasing fear entirely and more about weaving courage alongside vulnerability. The path to financial growth is less a straight highway and more a winding trail, where the terrain changes constantly, and so must our stride. My hope is that by embracing this complexity, you too can craft a uniquely resilient mindset, prepared to navigate uncharted terrain with openness and grace. One afternoon, I found myself staring down a proposal that made my stomach twist in knots. It was an invitation to invest in a startup led by a friend whose passion I believed in, yet the financial uncertainty loomed large. I hesitated, caught between the pull of loyalty and the caution gnawing at my mind. The usual voice inside me screamed, "Don't jump in blindly." Yet another part urged me to explore this opening, sensing it could be a catalyst for growth. What struck me was how sharply my emotions tangled during the decision-making process, revealing a tangled web beneath what I'd previously thought was simple apprehension. Stepping back, I realized how frequently my relationship with money had been a battleground between desire and dread. This internal conflict seemed fueled less by external facts and more by my habitual interpretations of instability. I recalled instances in childhood where scarcity shaped the emotional climate, instilling subtle cues about survival that I carried unconsciously. These inherited emotional echoes created a lens through which I viewed opportunities, as traps to avoid instead of doors to open. That insight sparked curiosity. Could I reshape this interpretive framework? A turning point came when I met Elena, a woman whose financial journey contrasted sharply with my own. She shared stories of her upbringing in a volatile household marked by scarcity, but described how she intentionally cultivated a mindset focusing on possibility and resilience. It wasn't easy, she admitted, but I learned to hear the whispers of opportunity underneath the noise of fear. Elena's narratives were rich with vivid imagery, seeing each challenge like a river that bends around obstacles, carving new pathways rather than deterring progress. Her metaphor resonated deeply. I realized my inner voice often battled the current, exhausting energy that could be redirected skillfully downstream towards growth. Her experience pushed me to explore the physiological side of financial anxiety. I started noticing early signals, racing heart, shallow breath, tight chest, that accompanied the mere thought of spending or earning more. Recognizing these as invitations to pause, I experimented with grounding techniques borrowed from mindfulness practices. Simple moments, placing a hand over my heart, observing the rhythm of my breath, opened new spaces of calm within the storm. Over time, these moments transformed what once felt like threats into signals guiding me to act with intention rather than reflex. Simultaneously, the notion of financial playfulness entered my awareness. My interactions with money had long been governed by rigid rules and stark boundaries, leaving little room for experimentation. Reframing finances as a game, where calculated moves and occasional risks could yield learning regardless of outcome, brought lightness to my approach. Imagine a chess player scanning the board, willing to sacrifice a pawn to set up a better position. That strategic flexibility felt foreign to me at first, but as I embraced it, my decision-making shifted. Opportunities to test ideas in small, controlled ways became exciting exercises, not paralyzing gambles. One evening during a dinner conversation, I voiced this shift aloud. "I'm starting to treat money less like an enemy and more like a teammate," I said, catching myself by surprise. A close friend laughed softly and replied, "Maybe that's why your confidence seems to glow differently lately." That exchange revealed how personal transformation reverberates beyond internal experience. It impacts relationships and how others perceive us. The subtle change in my energy altered social dynamics, inviting deeper trust and collaboration. Furthermore, I discovered that embracing ambiguity requires a delicate balance between preparedness and surrender. Planning remained essential, but it could no longer be a rigid shield that blocked potential growth. Instead, I learned to view planning as sketching rough outlines open to revision as circumstances evolve. This paradox of control within fluidity became a guiding principle, much like an artist approaching a canvas with both vision and openness to serendipity. It reframed uncertainty from a looming void into a fertile ground where creativity and discernment dance. Now, consider how this applies when you encounter an unexpected financial fork in the road. Does your mind leap wildly to worst-case scenarios, or can you cultivate a quiet curiosity instead? Picture yourself as a seasoned sailor navigating shifting winds who trusts the vessel's resilience rather than demanding the journey to be perfectly predictable. This mindset invites a richer, more nuanced engagement with resources and possibility, creating pathways previously obscured by fear or habit. Another layer unfolded as I began journaling about financial experiences, narrating not only facts but the emotions swirling underneath. This ongoing dialogue revealed recurring themes, patterns of scarcity thinking, moments of courage, and small victories often overlooked. Writing became a mirror reflecting my evolving relationship with money, encouraging reflection and strategic adjustments. These insights built a bridge connecting emotional awareness with practical action empowered by intention. Finally, I realized financial growth thrives within ecosystems, networks of people, knowledge, and experiences that nourish our evolving identity. By expanding my circle, seeking mentors, and engaging in communities with shared aspirations, I opened doors to unseen opportunities and fresh perspectives. This network nurtured accountability and inspiration, slowing isolation's voice of doubt. Together, these elements formed a rich tapestry weaving emotional resilience with strategic agility. Through embracing fluidity, cultivating playfulness, grounding my anxiety, and creating supportive relationships, I navigated a profound transformation. It wasn't instantaneous or linear, but a continuous unfolding that invited me to meet uncertainty as an ally rather than a foe. The weight of financial decisions lightened, replaced by a sense of engaged possibility. This evolving dance between control and surrender, fear and curiosity, reshaped my story, and it can reshape yours too. I remember a time when I faced a fork in the road that tested my entire approach to money and growth. A friend offered me a chance to co-invest in a project that promised potential but carried a stiffness of ambiguity I wasn't accustomed to. The numbers were unclear, and the path ahead murky. Instead of retreating or jumping in impulsively, I found myself caught in a unique space, an unsettling but compelling tension between caution and possibility. This moment forced me to confront a deeper question. Could discomfort itself be a signal rather than a warning? It struck me then that we often overlook the language our emotions speak during these moments of uncertainty. That uneasy flutter in my chest wasn't just anxiety. It was a nuanced message revealing aspects of my beliefs and fears I hadn't examined. I began to see that feelings of hesitation are not simply obstacles, but portals into understanding the narratives anchoring us to familiar patterns. The discovery reshaped my view. Rather than silencing uncomfortableness, I could listen closely to what it revealed about my internal maps and hidden assumptions. After exploring these inner cues, I turned outward, observing the financial behaviors around me with fresh eyes. I noticed that people who consistently navigated uncertainty well didn't deny their unease. Instead, they integrated it as an essential part of decision-making. For example, a mentor once described how he tracks his emotional rhythm during negotiations, recognizing spikes of impatience or doubt as indicators to slow down and recalibrate. He likened it to surfing, sensing the swell and timing the ride carefully, rather than charging recklessly or waiting passively. This metaphor struck a chord. It suggested an artfulness in embracing internal dissonance and using it to steer wisely. This insight extended into my daily actions. When confronted with a confusing bill or unexpected expense, my habitual response had been to clamp down tightly, avoidance masked as control. But now, I experimented with pausing to identify the precise emotional trigger. Was it fear of loss, shame around spending, or uncertainty about the source of funds? Naming those distinct shades allowed me to intervene differently. Instead of spiraling into overwhelm, I began strategizing solutions, breaking the problem into manageable parts. The practice turned what once spiraled out of control into a series of clear, actionable steps. Small victories in emotional navigation slowly translated into new financial behaviors. Interestingly, vulnerability emerged as a surprising ally in this context. I started sharing my financial challenges honestly with trusted friends, bypassing old habits of shame and secrecy. These conversations, rather than exposing weaknesses, forged resilience. I recall vividly the warmth of a friend's voice when I confessed feeling stuck and uncertain. She offered perspectives I hadn't considered, resources, networks, or simply validation that uncertainty is universal, not a personal flaw. This kind of candid exchange transformed my isolation into collaboration, making daunting financial choices feel less like solitary battles and more like shared journeys. Another layer unfolded when I examined the stories I told myself about deservingness and worth during these moments. Previously, a patch of financial unpredictability often triggered a deep, unspoken question. Do I deserve success, security, or ease? This internal dialogue cropped up as self-doubt and hesitation, quietly sabotaging opportunities. Facing these limiting beliefs directly required courage. I remember jotting down affirmations not as cliches, but as lifelines anchored in my personal values and aspirations. I am capable of navigating uncertainty with grace. Challenges expand my capacity, not diminish it. Repeating and embodying such declarations gradually rewired my mindset muscles. At times, these shifts felt like learning to walk on rocky ground instead of smooth pavement, awkward and unsteady at first, but building strength and balance. Not every step was perfect, and setbacks arrived, each inviting reflection rather than judgment. This gradual process helped me attune not only to rational assessment, but to physiological cues, the racing heart when I considered investing, the tightness in my throat when budgeting tighter, the surge of relief after a deliberate choice. Honoring this bodily wisdom added a fresh dimension to my decision-making, ensuring that actions aligned with holistic well-being, not just numbers on a page. Looking back, it's clear that cultivating patience became essential. Instead of demanding instant clarity or swift resolution, I learned to make space for uncertainty's natural unfolding. The metaphor of seasonal growth comes to mind. Trees don't force their leaves to sprout, but trust in cycles of warmth and rest. Similarly, financial progress required me to accept periods of stillness as part of momentum building. Learning to live with discomfort without rushing toward premature decisions deepened my trust in the process and in myself. Now, consider how this applies when you face moments where the path ahead isn't clear-cut. Can you welcome mixed emotions as informative compasses guiding you toward nuanced choices? Imagine your financial instincts as an intricate instrument, sometimes resonating dissonantly, sometimes harmonizing, inviting you to develop sensitivity and responsiveness. This delicate dance between awareness and action opens new doors, inviting creativity and resilience into your financial life. The unfolding journey, though uncertain, is alive with potential waiting to be discovered. There was a morning when I woke up drenched in a peculiar mixture of excitement and dread. I was about to pitch an idea that sparked in me for months, but doubts clung tightly, a silent storm beneath my skin. Instead of brushing those feelings away, I decided to sit with them, unravel their threads. I realized that these emotions weren't walls blocking my progress. They were signals from a deeper part of me stirring beneath the surface, urging me to prepare differently. The unease whispered, "Are you truly ready?" And that question became a catalyst for introspection, pushing me beyond superficial readiness into a space of authentic confrontation. Out of curiosity, I began tracing where my internal hesitations anchored themselves. It became apparent that many of the fears weren't birthed by the immediate moment, but were echoes of prior moments when risks led to harsh judgments, whether from others or myself. I saw these old tapes playing beneath my present thoughts, tinting the colors of opportunity with shadows of past vulnerability. Unpacking these layers revealed an overlooked tension between self-preservation and the yearning for advancement, a push and pull that shaped much of my financial conduct in stealthy ways. By exploring this inner dance, I noticed the critical influence of what I call threshold moments, instances when we teeter on the edge of change, unsure whether to leap, hold, or pivot. These junctures are often cloaked in uncertainty, feeling like invisible riddles challenging our trust in ourselves. During one particularly memorable threshold, I sat quietly after a frustrating meeting with a potential client who declined the project. Initially, my instinct tempted me to retreat into disappointment and doubt, but instead, I asked myself, what if this refusal is a doorway, not a stop sign? That simple reframe unlocked a floodgate of possibility, prompting me to refine the proposal, adapt my pitch, and eventually land a better opportunity. Observing this process in motion, I recognized something essential. In these fragile, suspense-filled moments, the stories we tell ourselves wield tremendous power. I recalled a friend who characterized her own breakthrough by naming each setback as a plot twist, embracing uncertainty as narrative fuel rather than an antagonist. Her storytelling reframed failure into transformation, inviting resilience through creativity. Inspired, I began recording my encounters with hesitation and loss in a journal, crafting narratives that celebrated learning and courage, not just outcomes. This practice rewired my inner script, making the unknown feel like an exciting, evolving chapter instead of a dead end. Parallel to these mental shifts, I grappled with the embodied sensations that surfaced during financial confrontation. It was as though my body bore ancestral memories, contracting when pressure intensified, holding fragmented stories of sacrifice and scarcity. I remember sitting beneath a sprawling oak, palms resting on the bark, deliberately breathing into the tightness lodged somewhere deep inside. Those tactile moments offered unexpected relief, a grounding balm washing across the chaos. It taught me that tangible connection to one's own physiological experience can serve as an anchor when navigating intangible risks, a tool often disregarded in traditional financial advice. Within this bodily awareness came another insight, a recognition that patience is not passive waiting, but an active, courageous form of engagement. I likened it to tending a delicate flame through shifting gusts, requiring attentive nudging, not forceful shielding. This understanding unraveled my tendency to demand rapid results, replacing it with compassion for the unfolding rhythm of growth. One evening, after weeks wrestling with a stalled negotiation, I chose to sit with uncertainty instead of pushing for hurried closure. In that resonance, fresh perspectives bubbled up, enabling me to reapproach with renewed clarity and softness that eventually changed the outcome. Another layer that enriched this evolving journey was embracing complexity rather than longing for simplicity. Financial matters rarely unfold in linear sequences or black-and-white decisions. They resemble a mosaic woven from intersecting threads of emotion, intellect, relationships, and timing. I found that leaning into this multidimensionality allowed me to detect subtle signals I previously overlooked. For instance, during a recent collaborative project, attention to interpersonal dynamics illuminated underlying hesitations among partners that affected budgets and timelines. Recognizing this nuance enabled us to address fears openly before they crystallized into barriers, transforming potential conflict into aligned collective action. Now, imagine yourself encountering a critical moment where outcomes hang in the balance and clarity seems elusive. Can you sense the spectrum of sensations within your body? Will you consider that the turmoil is layered and textured, inviting curiosity instead of resistance? Envision embracing your own narratives with care, allowing each uncertainty to enrich your story rather than diminish it. This approach fosters a resilient spirit that navigates financial complexity with grace and adaptability, not by erasing ambiguity, but by weaving it into a tapestry of ongoing transformation. Reflecting on this journey so far, I find myself standing at a crossroads illuminated not by certainty, but by a subtle glow born from the many threads weaving through my experience. The internal landscape I once navigated with hesitance is now imbued with textures that reveal a deeper rhythm beneath the surface noise, movements of courage, moments of stillness, and whispers of insight converging quietly, yet insistently. It's as if the map I thought was scattered and incoherent slowly reconfigures itself into an intricate mosaic, each piece illuminating pathways previously invisible. Walking this terrain has shown me that progress is not a linear climb towards an unreachable summit, but an unfolding dance, marked by shifts in how we engage with our internal world and the outer environment. The contours of financial growth begin to resemble an ever-changing river, sometimes rushing with vivid clarity, sometimes slowing into pools that invite introspection and adjustment. I notice now that what once seemed like resistance or faltering steps carried latent lessons embedded in the currents, urging me toward finesse, patience, and attuned action. The moments when uncertainty crept in no longer strike fear as relentless adversaries, but take on a dual character, a challenge laced with possibility, a shadow giving shape to emerging light. This interplay evokes a delicate balancing act, like walking a tightrope strung across two cliffs, where each careful breath and movement signals a willingness to embrace vulnerability intertwined with strength. As I linger on these images, I realize that the very fabric of transformation lies in embracing tension rather than dissolving it, a silent partnership between discomfort and growth. Suddenly, the emotional cadence within me feels less like a wandering solo and more like an orchestrated harmony, with each discord and consonance contributing to a greater composition yet unfinished. Through this evolving attunement, I perceive an invitation to dwell less on control or escape and more on participation. Participation in a process that demands presence, openness, and continual learning. I find comfort in the paradox that stepping forward requires surrendering the illusion of control, and that surrender reveals hidden reservoirs of resilience. This awareness invites me to see financial choices not merely as transactions or boxes to check, but as acts woven with intention and self-knowledge. Each choice becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of an emerging self who no longer fears the unknown but converses with it, asking questions and listening, sometimes in silence. In this space, the narratives I carry shift from rigid templates into living stories, fluid, evolving, and ripe with possibility. The dynamic interplay between past and present, fear and hope, doubt and trust crafts texture and depth into the journey unfolding beneath my feet. Amidst this unfolding, I glimpse the contours of a new horizon, not a distant goal standing untouchable, but a process pulsating in every moment. The intricate dance between learning, feeling, and acting reveals itself as a continuous thread, a rhythm I am invited to sync with rather than resist. As I draw deeper breaths and steady my heartbeat, I sense an opening, a threshold poised quietly just ahead, humming with potential. With this gentle yet profound shift, the story shifts its cadence, beckoning us toward what lies beyond comprehension, toward a chapter where wisdom and action entwine freely. In this light, I invite you to journey alongside me, to inhabit that space between what is known and what is emerging with trust and curiosity. The path, while winding, has begun to take shape underfoot, soft earth blending with rugged rock, the unknown mingling with glimpses of clarity. There is an invitation to pause here, to feel the weight and lift of what has come before, and then step forward into the story's next unfolding. The quiet anticipation is palpable, and in this charged stillness, transformation hums softly, eager to be embraced. I sit quietly now, tracing the arc of this journey, the small victories threaded with moments of doubt, the silent awakenings that shaped my view of what true prosperity means. It's remarkable how the quiet shifts inside us, subtle yet profound, hold the power to remake entire landscapes of possibility. I remember the early days when the weight of uncertainty pressed hard, making movement seem impossible, when I was convinced my circumstances framed an unchangeable fate. Yet, over time, I discovered that the real transformation dwells not in external markers, but hidden within the tender, sometimes fragile workings of my own mind and heart. There was a night when a restless wind rattled the windows, and as I watched shadows dance across the walls, I sensed something stirring inside, a willingness to lean into discomfort, to meet vulnerability head-on instead of flinching away. That moment crystallized a profound truth. Growth never demands certainty, only an openness to keep walking despite trepidation. Courage didn't arrive as a roaring lion inside me, but as a quiet, persistent companion nudging me forward with gentle insistence. This companion whispered that abundance isn't a sudden arrival or a trophy to be grasped, but a cultivated state of being, a dialogue between my inner world and unfolding experience, ebbing and flowing from day to day. As I reflect on these experiences, I recognize a pattern emerging like river currents shaping stones over time. Each choice, each response to bewildering challenges, carved away old fears and beliefs that once held me captive. In surrendering the illusion of total control, I opened a gateway to resilience fueled by curiosity and compassion. It became clear that scarcity was less an external condition and more a constriction in my imaginative capacity, the narrowing of potential by stories anchored in limitation. Yet, as that rigidity softened, new configurations formed, possibilities expanded, and the horizon itself seemed to breathe with my growing confidence. I think back to conversations where laughter mingled with honesty, friends sharing vulnerabilities, and wins with equal grace. Those moments taught me the power of community, how collective strength lifts the weight we often try to bear alone. In the glow of shared stories, shame unraveled into courage, and isolation gave way to connection. I came to see my quest not as a solitary battle, but part of a larger tapestry woven with others who have walked, and are still walking, roads filled with twists both daunting and dazzling. The greatest revelation, however, was personal. Prosperity is an inside job. It grows from seeds sown deep in self-acceptance, emotional alchemy, and a willingness to rewrite internal narratives. Financial success, while wrapped in numbers and outcomes, is inseparable from the emotional architecture supporting it. When I pause to nurture this relationship, to honor fears without succumbing, to envision growth amidst uncertainty, I stepped into a rhythm that felt sustainable, authentic, and freeing. This rhythm introduced a space for grace where before there was resistance, a space where imperfection became a doorway to genuine transformation. Now, I hold an invitation for us both, to treat every hesitation not as a stop sign, but as a gentle prod toward deeper inquiry and learning. When we feel the pulse of doubt or fear, we can listen attentively, uncovering what wisdom lies beneath. In doing so, we cultivate an inner dialogue rich with kindness and curiosity that serves as a compass through change. This is not a call for reckless leaps, but an encouragement to cultivate delicate boldness, to carry forward with hearts softened by truth and eyes wide open to surprise. The story of becoming financially free and emotionally whole is neither a straight line nor a rapid sprint. It is an unfolding dance where patience interlaces with daring, where the unknown invites exploration, and where every step forward carries the echoes of learning and hope. As I continue walking, I carry this understanding with me. In the silent moments where nothing seems certain, possibility is quietly gathering strength, waiting to illuminate the next step. And so, with that knowing tucked close, I invite you to pause and breathe deeply into your own story, to awaken the quiet hero within who is already navigating through, already gathering wisdom, already unfolding into a financial life rooted not in luck, but in the gentle mastery of inner transformation.